So he wanted to know about Vikings and Norse mythology. It wouldn't make sense to start at the end, so let's start at some point and call it the beginning. Roughly around the time of the Romans were busy Romanizing the Mediterranean Sea, the Germanic tribes of Phocis predominantly settled in the lands north of the Elbe River. Not much is known about these Proto-Norse aside from the runestones they left behind. They were covered in mysterious markings that historians decided to call Elder Futhark. It's called that because of the first 6 runes that comprise the alphabet: F, U, Thorn, A, R, and K. The TH being the Thorn letter, so it only counts as one. Historians are great at naming alphabets, often just choosing the first few letters of their language. Imagine we named the Greek alphabet after the letters Alpha and Beta. Anyway, the Proto-Norse spent the next few centuries farming, trading, and sailing around the Baltic and the North Sea. The largest settlements were focused around the coastal regions of southern Norway and Sweden, Denmark and parts of northern Germany. They became known as the Norse near the end of the 800s when a visit to the Lindisfarne monastery went wrong and the Norse were kind enough to help carry away the gold and silver item along with their monks, taking them home. Technically, the Norse set the fire and they didn't so much as help the monks return to their home, instead taking them across the sea to work as the Norse slaves. But semantics. 796 started the Viking Age with the Lindisfarne raid. This is because the Norse found out that their Christian neighbors had a lot of valuables that could be taken with just a little violence, or threat thereof. For the next 300-ish years, the Norse Vikings raided lands from Spain, to contract work for Micklegarth, the Great City, the eastern lands of the Roman Empire, against the Bulgaria, or the tribes of Turkland, land of the Turks. But European historians don't care about the raids on not Europe because that's not Europe, so they don't count. Most of the stories we have focus on the Frankish kingdoms and the fractal lands of Great Britain and Ireland. When the Vikings landed there, they were greeted with lands of harsh weather, varying climates and lots of lands ready for the taking. Perfect for them. More specifically, the regions called Gallia Lagdunensis Secunda, Maximus Historiensis, and Hibernia, Normandy, York and Ireland respectively. The Norse settled in large numbers in these regions through right of conquest, land allotments or lack of resistance. Normandy being the name of the land of the Northmen, after King Charles the Simple was defeated in combat after the Battle of Chartres. The land around York/Jorvik, a Norse-founded city, and the Danelaw region, areas under Norse control, was taken by the Norse conquest of North Britain and southern Scotland, along with the Hebrides Islands. Dublin was settled by the Vikings with little resistance from the native Irish, as there was barely any settlements in or around the Dublin area. The big question left is how? If the Norsemen conquered these areas, then why weren't they driven out? In Normandy's case, it was because they were granted the land to stop other Norse from raiding. Dublin had little Irish settlement in the area, so they were left mostly alone. But the lands of Britain, they lived there after conquering the lands and settling. One particular reason is that the Anglo-Saxon women found them to be quote-unquote irresistible. Maybe it was the fact that the Norse based every Lagardagin, wash day/Saturday, or because they took care of their physical appearances. It might have also been the fact that women were held in high regard in Norse culture, being treated as people and all that. You can't really blame them. Given the choice of your unwashed neighbor who treats you like a baby factory and a foreign conqueror that bathes regularly and treats you like a person, it's obvious. Brief disclaimer, not all Anglo-Saxon women left their husbands and married the Norsemen, some were kidnapped. So while the Christian Anglo-Saxons were afraid of washing their face too much because of the fear of going blind, the quote-unquote savage raiders made a habit of frequently cleaning their face, hands and hair, along with changing their clothes. Combs, tweezers and razors were found amongst their belongings. The Norse were also the first European to land in North America, nearly 5 centuries before Columbus. Greenland doesn't count, as Greenland doesn't really fit as there's no data on them. Around the year 1000, Leif Erikson landed in the land his men called Vinland, modern-day Newfoundland and Labrador area, due to the wild berries that grew there and were made into wine. Understanding the exact history of the Norse is difficult as much of their history was passed down orally. What was recorded was done so after the end of the Viking era by Christian scribes centuries after it happened and with a notable disdain for the quote-unquote pagan savages. So what did they believe? Surely they had to have had a vile pantheon to warrant the cruel raiding and plundering that the historians wrote about. Now the Norse didn't raid or Viking, roughly meaning pirate, because they were predestined for violence, but rather out of necessity. Their homelands were considerably poor in resources compared to their Christian neighbors. Much of the land of Norway and Sweden that possess resources reside in the mountainous regions that most pre-industrial societies would have no means to access. Denmark lacked most resources aside from lumber and fish. If a people are lacking in the resource that they need and their neighbors have it, they are left with two options, trade or take. So that's what they did. They traded for what they could, and what they couldn't, they took. This is reflected in their religious practices too. To simplify, the Norse had two races of gods, Vanir and Aesir. The Vanir focused on wealth, commerce and bounty. The Aesir focused on combat and military matters. Gods of trade and take. Most of the well-known gods are a part of the Aesir, with the exception of the siblings Freyr and Freya being Vanir. The Vanir reside in the realm of Vanheim, the Aesir reside in the realm of Asgard. These realms are two of the 9 realms which the Norse believe rest on Yggdrasil, the tree of life. Vanheim, Asgard, and Alfheim, Light Elfland, resting amongst the branches, Midgard, Middle Realm/Earth, Niflheim, the land of the dead, and Muspelheim, world wreckers, sit on the trunk in Jotunheimer, Giants Land, Nidavellir, Dwarfland/Svartalfheimr, Dark Elfland, and Hel, spelled Hel, resting among the roots. Some scholars place Midgard as the lone realm in the middle section, with Niflheim and Muspelheim among the roots. Everyone agrees that Asgard is on the branches of Yggdrasil, Earth is on the bark, and Hel is in the roots. Each realm is home to a unique race of magical life. Asgard harbors the Aesir gods, Vanheim has the Vanir, Alfheim was the land of light and dark elves, ruled by Freyr. Midgard is home to humanity, Jotunheimer had the Jotun, frost giants, and Muspelheim was home to the fire demons. Niflheim is the land of mist, fog, Nidavellir is the land of dwarfs, and Hel is the land of the dead. It's important to know that there were 3 different afterlives in Norse mythology. Asgard was where brave and well-known fighters went when they died in combat, half of the time. The others enter Freyja's halls of Folkvangr, the people's field. If someone dies an uneventful death, outside combat, or lives a life without note, they enter the land of Hel, ruled by the half-dead ruler Hel. Same as the realm, really easy to keep track of. The Aesir of Asgard is often the focus of the myths. So are the main players. Odin Borson, Loki Laufeyson, Thor Odinson, and their children or spouses. With the stories, the focus of them can be broken down into 3 major groups. Loki did something and everyone is pissed. The Aesir did something because someone else pissed them off. Someone heard a prophecy and decided to take matters into their own hands, directly causing it to come true by trying to stop it from happening. That last one seems pretty specific, but it comes up more often than you think. Which Aesir takes center stage in the stories? Odin Borson, or the All-Father, sits as the patriarch of the Norse pantheon, ruling with his wife Frigg, and his Vanir concubine Freya, the lady. Odin is best known for his lone eye, his twin ravens Hugin, Thought, and Munin, Memory, his spear Gungnir, his cloak and wide-brimmed hat. He was often depicted as an old man in his cloak and hat, similar to how most wizards are. This is strengthened by the fact that Odin was known for his magical prowess. This power was granted to him by his sacrifices to gain unknown knowledge. Knowledge and the pursuit of it held a high value in Norse society. So much so because Odin himself was willing to sacrifice much to achieve it. Odin approached Mimir the Rememberer, he sought to drink from Mimir's well. Doing so would grant Odin great knowledge and enlightenment, but he could not gain such knowledge without sacrificing something first. Giving his one eye to the well, Odin drank a full horn and in doing so achieved knowledge unknown to all but Mimir, a man who stood as his equal. This wasn't his greatest sacrifice. As for 9 days and nights, Odin hung himself from Yggdrasil, impaled by Gungnir. After the 9 straight days of suffering had ended, he removed himself from the tree with knowledge of the ancient and the occult. He knew and understood the magic runes, a skill that few could understand. To put it into perspective, the Norse Earth fate, Verthindi, happening, and Skuld, future, work on the roots of Yggdrasil, carving runes into the roots to determine the fate of all life. Odin now had the same knowledge that the Norm had been using to shape destiny. He was the All-Father, ruler of Asgard and knower of knowledge. Thor Odinson, wielder of Mjolnir and god of thunder. Many myths are about Thor seeking to achieve some goal or acquire some item. Brief footnote: Thor, along with his father, are present in many Germanic religions as Donner the thunder god and Woden the sky god. Thor is accompanied by his foster uncle Loki Laufeyson, the trickster god and giant from Jotunheimer. This is because Loki and Odin swore a blood oath of brotherhood. Sometimes Loki causes a problem and others he solves them. He is also known for shapeshifting and taking interest in men and women. Loki has been said to have fathered and borne many children. He birthed his son Sleipnir, the eight-legged horse of Odin, himself after transforming into a mare and seducing Sveithiofari the horse to prevent a giant from claiming his debt, as without Sveithiofari the deal could not be fulfilled. It is also said that Loki lived as a maiden for 8 years and gave birth to several children. Of his children, the ones birthed by Angrboth and the giantess, shaped the future of the mythos. Fenrir, Jormungandr, and Hel, H-E-L, each playing a part in Ragnarok. Ragnarok, the end of days of Norse mythology. Several stories are needed to understand Ragnarok, starting with the birth of Loki's 3 children. With the knowledge granted to him by Mimir as well and an understanding of the runes, Odin found visions of the future creeping into his dreams. Recently, visions of 3 figures that will cause the end of days. A titanic wolf, the endless serpent and the half-dead maiden. But this was just a dream, that was impossible to happen. At least until word arrived that Loki had fathered 3 kids with the giant Angrboth, Despair-bringer, and Odin ordered them brought to Asgard immediately. The eldest was a pitch-black wolf pup, easily the size of an adult. His younger sibling Jormungandr, the giant beast, the World Serpent, was a minuscule sea serpent, and their sister Hel, a maiden with half of her body being that of a beautiful woman and the other side being a decaying corpse. Each one was a match to the figure of his vision, the wolf, the serpent and the half-dead maiden. Trying to stop the vision from coming true, Odin ordered them sent away where they'll never be a threat. Foreshadowing. Hel was banished to the realm of Niflheim, the land for the ungallant dead. A land where she would take power as a goddess. For Jormungandr, Odin cast the serpent down to Midgard. Unbound by any constraints on its growth, it grew to encircle the entirety of the world, only stops by its own tail entering its mouth. Much like the Ouroboros serpent. But what to do about Fenrir? Perhaps there was good in the beast's heart, so the god of the sky Tyr was tasked with his care. Fenrir grew like a fire, doubling in size again and again until the fears of Asgard became too much. Under the guise of a test, Odin asked his nephew Fenrir if he would be up for a test of strength. He agreed and was bound in Asgard's thickest chains that were named Leidingir. With a powerful flex, the material was torn asunder. So again, Odin challenged him to break Asgard's strongest chains called Drami, saying that if he could break it then he would be known as the strongest in existence. He agreed and was bound tight in chains thicker than any before. Once more he shattered them and stood triumphant. Even the strongest chains they could muster could not hold the wolf. So Odin sent a messenger to Nidavellir and tasked the dwarf-smiths to craft a chain that could never be broken. They forged Gleipnir, a ribbon as soft as silk and just as smooth, forged from every cat's footful. All the beards of women, roots of rocks, sinews of bears, every breath of fish and spittle of birds, requiring all of them in existence to forge the ribbon. With the binding, Odin once more approached his nephew Fenrir, saying that if he could break this ribbon that not even the gods could share it would prove his strength. After the 3rd time, Fenrir was suspicious of their motives. He turned to them and said, touching this matter of the ribbon, "It seems to me that I shall get no glory of it, though I snap asunder so slender a band, but if it be made with cunning and wiles, then, though it seem little, that band shall never come upon my feet." They told him that if he should not break the ribbons then the gods would lose their fear of him and release him. Agreeing, he proposed a compromise. He would allow himself to be bound so long as a god placed a hand in his jaw. No god was willing to possibly sacrifice their hand to bind the beast, save one. Tyr stepped forward and declared that he would place his hand in Fenrir's maw. Binding him in the silken ribbon, he once more tried to rupture the binding, only for it to tighten with a struggle. No amount of force he could muster could snap the binding. Outraged by the betrayal, he ripped off Tyr's hand and swore revenge. With him subdued, the gods locked him away in a dark cell. The hatred they felt never ceased, so Fenrir struggled against the bindings. Each day growing stronger and each day the chains weakened. They will shatter and his spawn will devour the heavens, sparking Ragnarok. His binding and the birth of his siblings are the first steps to the end days. The tale of Baldur. Baldur is one of the sons of Odin and the brother to Hother the Blind and Thor. He was associated with light, courage and wisdom. So loved that if anything happened to him, the world would be devastated. Foreshadowing. Much beloved by the gods, Odin began to see prophetic dreams about his son's death. Saddling Sleipnir, the Allfather entered the underworld and approached the Seer, seers of fate, disguised as a wandering old man. Seeing that there was a banquet planned, he asked her what was the reason. She told him that they were expecting the arrival of the beloved Baldur. Proudly declared that he would meet his doom, but stopped when she realized that the mysterious man was the godly Allfather. It's amazing that more people don't realize that it was Odin, as he often chose to disguise himself as an elderly one-eyed man in a cloak and large hat. As he returned to Asgard with the news, he told his wife Frigg about their son's prophesied death. Wanting to prevent his death, Frigg did the only reasonable thing, making everything promise not to harm Baldur. Spears and stones to everything in existence. Everything but the small and innocent mistletoe. For Frigg found it to be so innocent and harmless that it could never hurt him. Foreshadowing. Loki, being an embodiment of chaos and change, decided to capitalize on that. As the other gods threw weapons and items at Baldur, knowing they won't hurt him, Loki began his plan. Approaching Hother the Blind disguised as a crone, she asked Hodr why he wasn't joining the other gods in throwing weapons at his brother. Hodr explained that he was blind and couldn't properly throw a weapon at his brother. Taking a dart carved from mistletoe, Loki placed it in Hodr's hand, saying, "You must feel quite left out, having to sit back here away from the merriment, not being given a chance to show Baldur the honor of proving his invincibility. Here, I will point your hand in the direction where Baldur stands, and you throw this branch at him." The weapon flew from Hodr's grasp and struck him dead. All the gods trembled as Baldur's death marked the second step of Ragnarok, the end of all. Asgard wept at the loss of the beloved Baldur, but none more than his mother Frigg. She begged anyone to find a way to bring back her slain child. Hermod Odinson descended into the underworld on Sleipnir and sought out Helga. As he went, the gods paid respect to their fallen kin. His wife Nanna and Baldur's slain horse were laid to rest with him, along with Odin's most treasured item, Draupnir, Odin's magical armband. Set on a ship named Horny, Odin whispered a secret to her slain child, before lighting the ship. Hermod pleaded with Hel to release her uncle and allow him to return to the land of the living, if not for his sake, then for his grieving mother. So she agreed, on the condition that she would only do so if everything in existence would weep for him. Should anything refuse it, then he would remain in hell with her forever. But with how beloved he was, it would be easy, right? Foreshadowing. With the key to their kin's return, the gods traveled to the ends of existence to get everything to shed a tear for the fallen god. Except for Thok the giantess. Perhaps a disguised Loki, she refused to shed one tear for the slain god, dooming him to remain in the land of the dead. Alive or dead, the old man's son has been no use to me. Let Hel hold what she has. So he was to remain. Following Norse customs, Odin swore to avenge his slain son. Siring a child with Ragnr, a giantess or possibly a Rus princess, their son Vali was enchanted with powerful magic to mature into a man before his first day's end. Drawing his bow, he slew his uncle Hothr. Frigg as did her husband recognized that the death of their son marked that Ragnarok was nearing. The binding of Loki. An unknown time has passed since the death of Baldur, a wound that may never heal for the gods, and slowly, things start to continue. Feasts and celebrations are held for events, all the while Loki continued to harass and taunt the gods. Something happened and Loki admitted that he was responsible for the death of Baldur, which made the other gods surprisingly mad. Fleeing, Loki hid in some unknown area by a river and built a house with 4 doors to watch out for any approaching gods. Crafting a simple fishing net out of twine to fish for salmon, transforming into the fish to hide, yet none could hide from the All-Father and his men. Loki heard the gods approaching and cast his net on the fire before transforming into a salmon to hide. The gods found his camp not long after, pulling the burnt net from the fire. They realized that Loki was likely hiding as a salmon and spent days carrying nets into the river to catch him. Loki nearly escaped by swimming out to the ocean and nearly did, only being caught by Thor by the tail, held so tight that all salmon had their tail sections compressed. No matter how much he struggled, he could not escape. The gods finally caught him, and he must pay. Death would have been too good for him. Loki had sired the beasts of Ragnarok and directly caused the death of Baldur. It was decided that he had to suffer. Taking him to a deep cave, they transformed his one son from Sigyn into a wolf and forced him to disembowel his brother. Taking the entrails, now iron chains, he was bound to stone. Skalthai placed a venomous serpent atop him to drip venom in his eyes. Loki's wife Sigyn held a bowl over his head to catch the venom. The bowl was not infinite, meaning that she had to leave his side and pour the venomous liquid away, allowing it to drip directly on his eyes. Every drip sent him thrashing in agony, shaking all of Midgard. There he would stay, bound in chains until Ragnarok. Ragnarok, the fate of the gods. Ragnarok, for the twilight of the gods. The end times begin with the shattering of chains. Loki frees himself from his chains and joins his kin the Jotnar, the giants, to lay siege to the gods. His son Fenrir breaks his chains, with his children Skoll, the one who mocks, and Hati, the one who hates, devouring the sun and the moon respectively, darkening the heavens. Jormungandr rose from the depths of the oceans of Midgard, the gates of hell opened and the legions of the dead follow their lady and join the war. The warriors of Valhalla and Folkvangr raise their weapons up once more and join the gods, Valkyries and shield maidens in their final fight. Loki, the Jotuns and Sutra sail on the ship Naglfar, built from the fingernail of the dead. On the battlefield, Odin meets his nephew Fenrir and fight. Long they fought, but Odin was rendered a corpse and eaten. Vidar Odin's and fights the beast into swallowed whole, escaping death by snapping the wolf's mouth open and killing him. Thor faces down Jormungandr in single combat. Thunder cracks, bones and blood are spilled, but the Thunderer triumphs in slaying the serpent, taking 9 steps before succumbing to the powerful venom. Surtur slays Freyr, Tyr and Garmr kill each other, Mani and Solveig fall to Skoll and Hati. Surtur sets fire to the 9 realms with his blazing sword hotter than the sun. The last to follow behind Heimdall, the whitest of the gods, and Loki, the wiliest of the gods, each felling the other. As the last gods fall, Baldur, his wife Nanna and Hother the blind descend from the underworld. It's important to know that trying to understand extinct religions, it's like trying to understand what someone looked like from an incomplete skeleton in paintings done by artists centuries after the fact. Much of the stories have some bleed over from Judeo-Christian beliefs. Ragnarok is said to end with the death of the gods, with the sole god Baldur good of justice, and light, and 2 humans emerging from the ashes to reclaim the earth. Any information about Norse mythology is to be taken with a grain of salt, as it was written centuries after its practitioners had died and all that remained was half-known fables and legends. The Poetic Edda, the Prose Edda, the Valsang, and the Wanderer's Havamal are written documentation of what was known of Norse mythology. Much of the existence of Norse mythology today is due to Icelandic scholars writing down their history. Gods and kings of legends were so tightly interwoven that it was impossible to mention one without the other, and so it was written. One famous ruler was Rolo the Walker, a titanic man who was too massive to ride a horse. He was the descendant of Odin, Israel's children and theirs, all the way to their great-great-great-great-grandson William I, of the House of Normandy. His blood continues to rule through his descendant Mountbatten-Windsor, Saxe-Coburg-Gotha Elizabeth II and her grandson, future King George VII Alexander Louis, Prince of Cambridge. Though the original practices have long since faded into the unknown, historians, writers and storytellers keep the legend of the gods alive. It is because of this historic importance of these to Icelandic and Scandinavian culture that the stories were able to remain at all, instead of going the way of many of the gods of the Celts and Slavs. Were it not for the careful writings of scribes and learned men, there would be a scarce understanding of the gods of the Norse and the Viking people. I've been the Irish explainer, and this has been a brief history of Norse mythology and the Vikings. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to place them in the comments below. Let me know what I should cover next. Have a great day and make sure to come back for more.